I'll introduce our next keynote speaker, who is the wonderful Hosanna Hali from Microsoft. She is also founder of the Tech Corner, technology specialist specializing in Azure at Microsoft, and she's going to give us advice on how to get into the tech industry. She'll be demystifying the tech industry, the roles within tech, and what it means to work in tech. And as with this morning, don't forget, if you have any questions at all, please make sure to add them to the chat during the talk, and Hosanna will, I'm sure, be happy to answer anything throughout her at the end. But yeah, have you got a presentation you want to share, Hosanna? Or
Yeah, afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining my session today. I can't see you, but I hope you're enjoying it so far. I'm going to share my screen. I have not used this platform any time, but I have practiced, so I will try my best just to share it. So again, hello everyone, my name is Hosanna, and I'll be talking a little bit more about demystifying what it means to work in tech for you guys today. So just to kick off a little bit about myself, I know that Henry did a bit of an introduction, but I'll reintroduce, that's okay. My name is Hosanna Hali. I am an Azure Specialist at Microsoft. I've been working at Microsoft for almost 4 years now. I'll talk a little bit more about kind of like how I started with Microsoft, what I do, what I did later on in the presentation, but that's my current role and occupation as of today. I'm also the founder of the Tech Corner, which is a platform I put together to help people to start getting into tech, anyone who's interested in tech. I think I started this platform about 2 years ago now, but I'm on kind of Instagram, TikTok, a lot of kind of social media platforms, and it's part of kind of the conversation that I'll be having today. So really looking forward to this, and please let me know if you have any questions. So a little bit about the agenda. I'm going to be talking about my journey to tech, just to give you guys an understanding of, where I've been, how I got here, to help shape the conversation. Then we're going to go into what it means to work in tech. Then we're going to talk about how to get started for anyone who is at zero, or really for anyone who already works in tech but is thinking about transitioning into a different area of the tech industry. And then finally, hopefully we may have some questions, and I'm happy to take any in the Q&A, or after, feel free to find me on social media if you're a little shy or anything like that, to just drop me a message and I will definitely try and get back to you. So just to kick off on my journey to tech, so this is how I kind of started my journey before arriving at Microsoft. So I did an undergraduate degree in business management at Cardiff University. My original plan was to go into finance, so it made sense for me to do business, and then the plan was to do a master's in finance and then transition into the finance world. My dad works in finance, so it's always been kind of a plan for me to do that. So I did 3 years of my undergraduate degree. I really enjoyed it and things like that. But when I got to the end of my business degree, I actually realized that I didn't want to go into finance after I did some insight days and talked to a lot of people about their roles, the work-life balance, etc. So I decided that I didn't want to go into finance anymore. But luckily, I was quite lucky at the time where my university was offering conversion degrees, which meant that I could convert into the School of Computer Science and study a degree in there, learn to code and just generally learn about tech without having had a tech background. So at the time, I didn't know that much about technology, but I knew that it was on the rise. At the time, when I started around 2016, there were things, it was kind of the rise of things like Uber, WhatsApp, Monzo, and things like that. So it was starting to get really exciting with the tech space. And I had kind of spoken to people who were already working in business, and they advised me tech was kind of the future and for me to consider it. So I decided to do that master's degree in computing. And in the meantime, I did an internship in recruitment. I did not enjoy it at all, but it was a part of kind of my journey. I wanted to have an internship and to kind of do something in the summer. I did learn a lot from the internship, but it wasn't something that I was planning to go into. But then I went back to university. I did that degree. So I did that for a year. It was a master's degree in computing. So I learned things like, obviously, development, so around Python, JavaScript, things like that. I learned some programming languages, did a lot of web development as well. And then I also did some things around things like human-centric computing, things like e-commerce, like lots of different elements of technology in one degree. It was one year long of learning plus my dissertation, still at Cardiff University. And that was kind of my first step into tech, I guess. That was my first interest of technology. And when I finished that degree, I decided to start looking for jobs within tech. My first plan was to become a software engineer. My stepdad and my sister are both software engineers. So I had an idea of what the role would be once I finished. By that time, more people were kind of talking about tech and things like that. So people had transitioned into it. But yeah, so my plan was to be a software engineer. And again, I went to Insight Days, career fairs, talking to software engineers. And I decided once again that software engineering wasn't for me, but I still had a massive interest in technology. And then I started looking for different jobs within tech. What else could I do? What transition could I move into, et cetera, et cetera. And luckily, I found a graduate program at Microsoft. And this was in the sales organization of Microsoft, which would allow me to do a job where I would still be talking about technology, but I wouldn't be the one kind of programming and developing. So I did the application process and got the job and started my journey to Microsoft. And with grad programs, this is not just Microsoft, they tend to start a year later. So I took a year off. I went traveling and went to kind of like Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, traveled for a little while and worked as well before starting at Microsoft in September 2018. And so, yeah, that is a little bit more of my journey. So I have a bit of an unconventional journey to tech. I'm not kind of your usual computer scientist and then developer kind of route, which a lot of people take. But I think that's great because there's lots of different ways to get to kind of break into tech now, and you can kind of take a route that works for you. So then, of course, I started at Microsoft. I started my job at Microsoft as what they call a client technology lead. So this was a strategy role where I was helping customers still within the sales organization. But my job was to help customers to build their strategy for technology. So, for example, a customer could say they really want to allow their employees to work virtually in the next 3 years. And I would work with them to kind of figure out what that would look like. And I would also advise them on things that they didn't know about technology. So advise on things they should be considering. So for example, obviously now everyone's talking about virtualization due to COVID, and people are talking about security as well due to COVID. I would be speaking to them about that, going to conferences and things like that as well. So I did that role for 2 years. It was a generalist role, which meant that I was talking to customers about the entire Microsoft portfolio, which was good, was interesting. And then I decided that I no longer wanted to be a generalist. I wanted to focus a little bit more on a specific technology, and Azure was the area that interested me the most out of Microsoft's portfolio. So after 2 years, I decided to become what we call an Azure Specialist at Microsoft. Specialists of this type also exist at other tech companies, especially the ones in cloud computing. But I was specific to Azure across both infrastructure and data and AI. But I'll talk a little bit more about my role later on within the presentation. So, of course, this section is more about kind of working in tech, what it means to work in tech. And I think it's a really important topic because obviously a lot of people will say, I work in finance, I work in tech, I work in marketing, I work in law, etc., etc. But specifically for tech, it can get a little bit confusing because, you know, working in tech can also mean being in a technical role. And that is what people tend to relate to. So what does it actually mean when people say working in tech? What does it mean to actually work in tech? So I think for most people, and especially kind of 4 or 5 years ago when I was starting kind of my journey within tech, definitely when you thought of tech, you thought software engineering, you thought coding, you kind of thought all the TV shows you've ever watched about programming and coders, and software engineering was kind of the center of tech. And of course, it is a core and important function within the tech industry, but it's pretty much what a lot of people, especially a number of years ago, thought about tech. So when someone said they worked in tech, you thought they were a software engineer or software developer or web developer of some kind, someone that was programming and coding and supporting organizations to create software. So that's what we definitely used to think about tech. And some people still do, especially people who don't know the industry at all, will still think software engineering. But I think we've come a long way when it comes to kind of technology and things like that, and understanding the industry. And I would say now most people will probably know these roles like data scientist, UX UI designer, web developer, of course, software engineer, because again, it is a core function for the tech industry. Without software engineers, we wouldn't have kind of software to sell. There would be no industry. So the software engineering role is still a core function there. But of course, now we know a lot more about the tech industry. And most people, when they think about kind of working in tech, they think about these extra roles. They think data scientist, product manager, enterprise architect of some sort, some engineering, some architecture, some developing, some designing. Those tend to be the areas of tech that people think about. So again, when people say they work in tech, what does that actually mean? Often we think about, again, these roles, something to do with technology, working with technology very closely, or being technical. It tends to be what people think of actually working in tech. But in actual fact, if you know every single role on this slide, I would bet that a lot of people actually don't know these roles, like especially things like a global black belt, which is very specific to Microsoft, but it is a role title at Microsoft for people who work within a tech company, within the sales organization. They're essentially very, very specialized people in a specific solution, and they support the sales cycle for an organization when trying to sell technology into another organization. But like I said, I would be willing to bet a lot of people have never heard or are only just starting to hear of the other roles on this page. So things like a solution specialist, which is what I am, a technology strategist, a technical account manager, a cloud solution architect, a customer success manager, a solution engineer. So while these people, a lot of these people, most of them won't code, or if they do, it's very, very, very kind of specific to something, especially if they're pre-sales for the solution engineer and the cloud solution architect. If they're pre-sales, they're less likely to code. But these people can also say they work in tech. So they work within the tech industry as a whole. So I think this is what we are getting to a point now that people are starting to understand what it is to work in tech. They mean the industry. They work in a role which helps to deliver technology to the general public. So whether they are in marketing, whether they're in the marketing, especially marketing is so interesting because within a tech company, you have the marketing for an organization and then the marketing for a product, which is very different as well. So whether, depending whether you work in engineering, design projects, this is actually what it means to kind of work within the tech industry. So just to follow on to that is just thinking about technology and tech when people say, just to make sure that we support people who don't know that tech is an industry and it has a number of different areas within it that all works together like a cog within a machine to ensure that we have our iPhones, we have the cloud, we have AI and Siri and all of these things. We have Surface laptops and things like that. So there are different people working to do different things within the organization. And these areas, include, like I said, sales, post-sales, internal roles as well. So IT teams who support the organization internally. So that things like data scientists might be internal rather than working with customers or anything like that. Obviously development with software engineers, web developers, and of course design as well. UX designers to make sure everything works and functions well and is also aesthetically pleasing for us to use. And obviously, of course, projects, which I think is the one where it can be a bit confusing about where it sits. So people like project managers, some product managers sit within engineering, some don't. So there is jobs there where obviously their entire role is dedicating to ensure that a technology goes to market. So if, for example, Instagram has a new rollout of something new, a new feature, I'm sure there's a project manager who's working on that. There's a project team to ensure that the feature comes out on time, that they've hired the right people, that the engineering teams know what they're building, and that they're specifically within budget. So tech is a whole industry with a number of different elements to it, and it really depends what you're interested in and what you want to do. And what your ambition is to help you to figure out where you should work. But it's essentially what it looks like for us when we think about working in tech. We think, okay, different departments and they all work together. And actually in a lot of big organizations, so for like Microsoft and Google and Amazon, all the other biggies, the different departments, for example, sales, are actually organizations on their own. And actually in the UK, the Microsoft UK subsidiary is actually the sales subsidiary. So if you think the UK offices for Microsoft is majority salespeople. So just lots of different terminology there and lots of different functions for anyone who's interested to definitely think about working in there. So just to kind of clarify, we've working with tech, it's definitely about the different types of skills. And when we think about the tech industry, we think about kind of what skills do you have, and different jobs across the industry will definitely require a massively different type of skills. Even if you are, let's say you say I'm an engineer, but you could say, are you front end, are you back end, are you kind of working on applications, or you're working on websites, mobile, there's so many different things, iOS, so many different types of engineers, and they all need different skills. And of course, some roles will depend on technical skills, such as programming, cloud computing, data science, AI, and things like that. Whereas others will require you to have more non-technical and interpersonal skills to be the main function of what you do. Skills such as organization, communication, business acumen, and of course, all of that wraparound can go into sales, it can go into marketing as well. So thinking about the different skills you might need as a person working within the tech industry. And then there will be roles which ask for both, which is what some people forget. And some people think when you say that you work in a non-coding role, it means that you're not technical, which is of course not always the case. For example, I work every day with cloud solution architects. Now they are very technical. They architect solutions for our customers. They work with them one-to-one, building, architectural design, etc. But a lot of them do not code. At most, they do some scripting, so they know a little bit of JSON and they know how to use the environment. But many of them do not code and do not use any programming languages. I know some who don't at all, have never coded, will never code, or not interested in coding, but they are still considered technical. So that's where there's different variations of how you can think about kind of tech roles and what's involved in them. But I guess when we say kind of working in tech, in the nutshell, it's something that where everyone is always learning. At Microsoft, it doesn't matter whether or not you are in engineering, marketing, design, projects. Everyone needs to know what Azure is. Everyone needs to understand what it is, at least at a high level. So when you are working within the tech industry, and I think that's what tech sets tech apart from different types of industries, you are constantly learning, and everybody needs to have an understanding of what the core function of the organization is. So for us at Microsoft, obviously, we've got Azure, we've got Dynamics, we've got Teams, we've got all these different things. And everyone that works here needs to obviously understand what those are at a high level. And then you become more technical depending on the role that you have. So definitely a variety of skills. And that's essentially what it means to work in tech. Everyone has a different skills and are working together to ensure that the technology goes to market and is delivered to the general public. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about kind of what I do to give you guys an understanding of what it actually means to be a salesperson within a tech organization. And that's obviously part of kind of working within tech. Again, we all work on solutions, but Microsoft has a number of customer solutions. So many of you guys know the products we do. I'm sure you've used them. I'm sure you use Office 365, gaming, all these other different things. But I specifically sit in an area where I focus on applications and infrastructure and data and AI. So as part of my role as an Azure Specialist, I look after infrastructure and applications and data and AI. But these are just a number of our different solutions, which, again, everyone who works at Microsoft works together to ensure that all of these are delivered to anyone who uses them. So for those who don't know, Azure is essentially Microsoft's cloud computing service, and we have a number of different organizations using Azure every single day. It is part of their kind of core function, part of their strategy to use, and I'm sure lots of organizations will continue to also use them in the future, but I'm sure you guys recognize some of these on the screen as well. So specifically my role, obviously I told you guys at the top of the call that I am what we call an Azure Specialist. And essentially specialist makes it sound like a really specific technical role, but I work in the sales organization at Microsoft. And my job is to understand what Azure is, identify opportunities, and then help customers to be able to adopt the technology. So I work with different organizations and I support them with that. So things like a lot of the time I work with senior leaders and support them with their digital strategy. So a lot of people will say we want to get off on premises, and we definitely want to be in the cloud. And I'll speak and I'll listen and I'll say, okay, so what are your challenges doing that? How can we support you with that? Or the flip way around is they can just be talking and then I'll say, oh, that's an opportunity for security. That's an opportunity for DevOps within Azure. That's an opportunity for some of our AI tools, Power BI for the organization to use. So lots of talking with senior leaders within an organization. Obviously, we have to understand specific industries, trends and challenges as well. I work within the education sector, and I think that's also a difference within kind of tech, the tech industry. When we say we work in tech, a lot of us are split up within industries that we're interested in. So what does technology look like for education? What does technology look like for finance? What does technology look like for retail? All of those are different industries, and we cannot possibly develop the same solution for all of them. So we have to think, all the developers that are working to develop that, they'll be thinking about that. And then all the project people and all the design people and everyone else, sales, when you get to us, post-sales, they'll also be thinking, what does technology look like for education specifically? So I have to make sure I understand that, and we all do it as well. So there's a lot of elements to working within tech. You've got your own role, your day-to-day, understanding the technology that you're working with, but then also understanding the technology that other people are working with as well to support what you are doing. So of course I've spoken about the technology already. I'm Azure Applications and AI as well, whereas other people can do dynamics, security, model work. So we work with industries and technology partners as well. So we work, again, it's so interesting because my job requires me to work with bodies, governmental bodies as well, not just kind of I work in tech, so I work on technology and that's it. For most people, working in tech means, what does tech mean for the entire, basically, world? I'm thinking about the world in which you function in. What does tech mean for that? And how can we support that? And that's as part of, I think, every single function within the tech space. So ensuring that, you're always learning, we're always innovating and finding ways to support our customers. So I would definitely say working in tech a lot of the time means learning, consulting, and innovating. Even when I say I tell people I work in sales, I often forget, because when people think sales, they think a lot of pitching. But I think in the 4 years that I've been at Microsoft, I've pitched maybe 4 or 5 times. I very rarely do presentations to customers, because the point of technology is to solve problems. So working in tech is thinking, okay, so what's the challenge and how can tech support? And that's the way that we are always thinking about what we need to do within our roles. And I'm sure that's what everyone else in different functions are, the software engineers, the project managers, all of them thinking about what is the challenge in which the world is having, essentially, and how can we support that? And we do the same with the solution that has already been built, essentially. So for me, those 3 key words really hone down what it means to work in tech, within the tech industry. So a lot of the time people think kind of tech, like I said, they think obviously you're programming and you're kind of very internal, but actually obviously we support a number of organizations to ensure that that they have the technology that they use. So a lot of the time working in tech, again, is thinking about those other organizations. What are we going to do to support them? Not just thinking about us as a company, thinking about how we can support them. And for the Carlsberg Group, this is a case study that we have. We have a lot of case studies online, open to the public, which you can find and have a read. But this was about getting them off on premises onto Azure to support their everyday functioning of Carlsberg and to support their success. So within this, there obviously would have been software engineers who are working on Azure in the back end, designers to ensure that the Azure portal functions properly and is aesthetically pleasing for people. There'll be project managers, there'll be other things, and then there'll be salespeople. There would have been a sales team who have worked on this to actually make sure that the customer has gone from on-premises into the cloud and has achieved their objective, which is obviously how the case study came about. So if you're interested in reading full stories, just go online and have a read, and just type in Microsoft case study stories. And there's lots of interesting things on there that I think you probably give you an idea of actually what it means to work in tech when we're kind of helping customers to do some of these things. So like I said, lots of people would have worked on this, and post-sales is probably the end of that, where they probably have a customer success manager, service delivery manager to help support, keep the upkeeping of the area in which they're working on. And then moving slightly on to how to get started, just giving you guys, for anyone who I guess hasn't started in tech yet, is thinking about working in tech, but also for anyone, like I said at the beginning, who just thinking about different areas of tech, is maybe thinking about leaving a technical role, going to a more non-technical role, or the flip side, it doesn't no longer wants to work in kind of sales or marketing within tech, but now wants to work in programming and data science, AI, and things like that. So I would say these are kind of like the key points when it comes to getting started with tech. I would say think about, number one thing, I would say finding your niche. So thinking about what interests you within the tech industry. What is about the tech industry that you find interesting? What do you see yourself doing? Do you see yourself coding? So thinking about going into engineering. Do you see yourself kind of being driven by consumption and usage and numbers and things like that? So because in my role, within the sales role, my targets are based on the consumption and the usage of Azure as a solution. And if anyone who knows cloud computing, you'll know that it is pay as you go. It isn't I've sold you this, now off you go. You can use it. It's you're using it today, you might turn it off tomorrow. How do I keep you using it? How do we continue to have value? How do we ensure that the platform keeps running? If someone has migrated over, how do we stop them from demigrating, which you would never, obviously, of course, would not never want to have. But thinking about those different type of skills, do you want to speak to customers every day, or would you rather be in the back end? Would you rather do sales and kind of drive the consumption, or would you rather do post sales, which is about more maintaining that consumption and ensuring that the customer has everything that they need in regards to any technical issues that may come up and things like that. But you might be all interested in like design. Are you creative? Do you like the look of things? I did a bit of HCI, human-centric interaction or computing at university. I found it really interesting, but I knew that it wasn't something that I want to go in and do forever. That some people might. So you might think about a role in there, or project or marketing. So really thinking about what you want to do. What is your niche? What interests you? What drives you? If you're interested in being technical, obviously you think about things like engineering. But if you're thinking about, I'm more driven by money, you might think, okay, actually sales allows me to both talk about the technology without programming, but I'm probably going to make more money in regard to bonuses and things like that. So it really just depends on what you want to do, but find your niche. And the reason why I say that is because when it comes to your application within the tech industry, and everything you apply for is so tailored to the role that you are doing. Whereas I think other industries are slightly different, where it's you could apply for a job and the application could fit for so many different roles. Whereas within tech, it tends to be, if you're applying for engineering, you probably have to do coding interviews and technical interviews. So you have to be prepared for that, coding tests and things like that. If you're applying for sales, you're more than likely going to have to present something just to show that you understand the technology well enough to explain it to someone else who may not be technical, which is of course what they're looking for in sales. And also within sales as well, you may have technical interviews as well, depending on how technical your sales role is, essentially. So really thinking about that to tailor your application and prepare yourself for when you're going to be applying, essentially. And then, of course, when you've decided that you are interested in tech, or you've decided a new area in tech might be of interest to you, consider looking at building some of the necessary skills that are needed for you to do that job. And I've listed a few there. So things like programming, cloud computing, data science, analytics, and things like that, DevOps and sales are all obviously core functions and core skills. There are so many more within the tech industry, but these are the ones which you tend to see are within a number of different roles. So for example, Cloud computing, I understand cloud computing. I work with it every day working with customers. I know what it is. So that could overlap with sales, because obviously I work in sales. I am an Azure specialist. So it's kind of overlapping. Or I could just work on cloud computing. I could be an Azure engineer and specific work within cloud computing, and work within the environment. Exactly the same as that. Within the sales function at Microsoft, we have data analytics specialist, DevOps specialist, AI specialist. So it's all different type of specialists, but you could obviously be a standalone DevOps engineer or an AI engineer and do different types of roles. So thinking about building those necessary skills are really important, because again, it goes back to working in tech really just means what skills are you using to help within the tech industry. What are you doing? Are you marketing the product or the solution? Are you developing it? Are you selling it? Are you designing it? What are you doing to ensure that the solution is kind of going to market and it's available for everyone that needs it? And then finally, I would say if anyone who's getting started, really try and use free resources. If you're interested in working within the tech industry, there are so many now. There definitely wasn't as many as when I started. When I started my degree in 2016, there was a couple of YouTube videos and stuff like that, but not as many as there is now, almost 6 years later. So it's very, very, very different to what it was before. So try and have a look at what's available there for you. Try and think about different skills will need different kind of resources, but YouTube is a great place to start. I've listed some YouTubers who I watched both when I was programming and now that I'm not programming and I'm looking at more cloud computing knowledge. I use Tech World with Nana. She's really great. She explained to me the difference between kind of Kubernetes and other things and containers and things like that. She's fantastic. So think about that, looking at kind of those free resources and then starting there. That is the best place to get started. Just watch YouTube videos and take the information in. And then if you're specifically thinking about coding, I'm sure if you're already an engineer, you already know Free Code Camp and Code Academy, but it's a great way to get started. They're free resources online just to give you a taste of what it means to kind of program and things like that. And I guess if you are very specifically for some reason interested in specifically what I do and want to get started with learning cloud computing rather than kind of programming or something else, then definitely check out Microsoft Learn. It's our platform for learning all things Microsoft solutions. So it can be cloud computing, but within that, it's kind of infrastructure, it's DevOps, it's data and AI, it's developer tools. Depending on what you want to do, the platform has a number of different things available for you there. So try to kind of have a look at it. And it's for both beginners and advanced learners. And obviously, you can also take your certification for that within the platform. If you have to pay for the certification, unless you go to the Microsoft training days, and we offer free certification with the training day as well. But it's a great place to get started when you are learning, when you're wanting to learn different solutions, but they tend to be related to kind of cloud computing, and they sit within a cloud function. So that could even be Dynamics as well, or Office 365 security within the cloud. So Microsoft Learn is a great place, and getting those certifications are, a great way for you to get started in regards to your knowledge, but also showing that you have a bit of knowledge. A certification is probably not going to get you a job, but it's a good place to show. It's a good addition to the knowledge or the work that you've already done. So definitely check it out if you get a moment. And I think that's it. I wanted to see if there were any questions at all or anything like that. So if you have any questions, happy to take them. I've got time.
Well, yeah, first of all, Hosanna, thank you very much for that. A very insightful talk into both what you do and different routes into the tech industry, both the technical and less technical side of it. So we've got quite a few questions to get through so far. So buckle in. We'll slowly work our way through them. The first one we've got is, what would you advise for someone who their degree isn't in computer science and they haven't transferred into one, but they're looking to get into a role in both software or technology?
Okay, nice. So if you don't have a technical degree, I would think about what is kind of like the easiest and what is the best route for you to transition over. So for some people, it could be that they do a boot camp, which has become really popular with over the last few years now. So my sister actually did that. She had a degree in education and a degree in HR, and then she did a boot camp. And now she's a software engineer. So think about different routes. So it could be a boot camp, it could be an apprenticeship as well. There's a number of different apprenticeships now. If you are thinking about transitioning into a different role, they now take career changes as well. I'm not sure if you're early in career or not, but I would definitely consider looking at boot camps, apprenticeships. You can also self-teach. So that's a route. It's much more difficult to self-teach, I would say. But if you are very determined and you kind of don't need the structure of a university or a boot camp or anything like that, do you consider self-teaching yourself? The great thing about the tech industry, especially with these roles, is that often we consider like our own projects as experience. It's great to work for a company, but if you've managed to build an application by yourself and you've got the code for that, that is pretty much a good way to show that you've got the skills to do the job. So that would be my advice. So if you're thinking about your first software engineering job, but you don't have a technical degree, just think about those different routes. But you could also consider applying for a graduate program. I'm not sure if you're a graduate or not right now, but there are loads of graduate programs which will take you, if you have experience of the technology, which you can get on your own, or you can volunteer as well. Is there a local charity that needs a new website? Is there friends and family who have a business who also need support with their technology? So think about building those skills in a different way, and then to make your life easier, maybe in the future think about going for something that's more kind of certified and structured to just get your foot in the door.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think just to add as well, isn't it never too late to get into tech? I've actually just very recently, last week, helped place an ex-bus depot manager who'd done that for 10 years to his first software developer role.
Wow.
So yeah, never too late to get involved. And yeah, like you said, so many resources out there to help with
Absolutely.
So next up, very specific, I believe, to Microsoft here. But do you have any idea what the best way to prepare for the MZ 900 exam is? Someone has one booked next month.
Oh, nice. Congratulations. Definitely, I would say use Pluralsight. So Pluralsight, sites like to see. I love Pluralsight when I was preparing. I find it much easier than reading kind of documentation. I struggle with reading. Pluralsight has videos, and I prefer that. So use Pluralsight, use YouTube. I think Pluralsight was the best. And just really try to understand what cloud computing is before you try and take the exam. Because if you're just reading the words, it just won't go in. Try to know what cloud computing is. Try to explain it to someone else. So as part of the interview process at Microsoft, actually, they asked me, how would you explain cloud computing to a 5-year-old child? Now, if you don't know cloud computing, you're not going to be able to explain it to someone who doesn't know it. So just try and learn the concept yourself. But I would say definitely Pluralsight was really, really, really good for me, and any kind of online, and just read the different sections and things like that. It's a really good platform.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And then another Microsoft focused question. How does Microsoft orient new employees within the organization, both from sort of a junior grad level and those who've been recruited for sort of skilled technical positions, such as software or networking?
Oh yeah, good question. So for grads, I'll talk about grads more because that's kind of what I know for most grads. Most grads come in and have like a training program. So it's a 2-year program so Microsoft doesn't rotate people, but it focuses on preparing you your first year to go straight into the role. So you do all your training within that first year. And then on the second year, you kind of roll off into your first year of working as a grad. And then after that, you just become a full-time employee and just be working full-time. So we have lots of training programs in place for them. I couldn't name what they are specifically for software because obviously I'm not within that function, but I'm sure it's very similar to what I did in regards to I had different training, basically just training to do. We had training sessions. We were sent over to training boot camps. I think some of the more technical people went to like Romania. You do like little boot camps in that year, and then you do all your learning. And hopefully by the end of that year, you should be ready to start your grad job and then move on. But for new employees, I'm not too sure, unfortunately, because I have never been one. But I'm sure you could probably find it online.
An interesting question here. I'll slightly rephrase it. How do you look at the people sort of standing out from the crowd who get selected by sort of Microsoft for the grad programs and help them get into sort of the more noticed positions?
Okay, I would definitely say what a lot of people do when they're applying for like tech roles is that they spend a lot of their time preparing for the technical interview, which is obviously great. Most companies, especially the big ones, the Googles, the Microsoft, the Facebook, the Netflix, all of them will tell you how they hire. You will find the processes online. You'll find the questions. You should be able to find, well, not the specific question, but if you use stuff like Glassdoor, there'll be previous questions that have been asked in the past. You'll find it all. Like they'll tell you how it's going to go. And I would say what people don't do is that they don't prepare for like the non-technical aspect of it. And sometimes that's where you might shine, I guess, because great, if you're a software developer and you have the skills for it, you will be able to see that. And the company will be able to see that when they give you a first coding interview, they'll be able to. But what happens when you have to do like a peer programming? They won't just be looking for your technical skills. They'll be looking to see how you work together as a team and how you collaborate, how you communicate. Do you fit with Microsoft like values and what we see as our core function, our core skills, our core culture is the word I'm looking for. Do you fit in with that? So I would say to stand out, do all of the prepare, be on lit code, prepare for what's coming from a coding perspective, because you'll definitely have to do coding interviews for a developer position, but also be prepared for the non-technical things that they may be looking for in you that they might not ask you. They may not ask you, what is your preferred culture? They may not ask you that, but they will ask you maybe different things, and be prepared for those questions and be able to show that you're kind of a Microsoft person, essentially. All tech companies will have their own thing, like Google has Googliness, and everyone has to take the Googliness interviews, whether you're a software engineer, marketer, sales, etc. So it's kind of the same, similar at all tech companies. Try and think about who you are as a whole employee rather than just the technical element of it.
Wonderful, yeah, thank you. And then I guess an interesting insight here into Microsoft regarding sort of technical and non-technical competencies and specializations. What do you see as sort of the high levels of leaders at Microsoft? What kind of skills do they typically have from a technical and non-technical standpoint?
Oh, okay. So I think this really high level leaders. It depends what that means. If you mean managers or if you mean
I assume the question is more sort of like country director or sort of business unit level directors rather than just sort of line managers.
Okay. And I think, I guess it depends on, a lot of the time it depends on the department in which you are leading. You'll find that depending on the department you're leading, most managers have been in the role of the kind of the first role that's there. So if you are leading a sales organization, most managers have been account executives, which is obviously a main sales role, and they'll be kind of having the skills of that role to help support their team. So they grow into, so they have the component, so sales and business acumen, all of this. But obviously, most people will also have an understanding of the technology, right? You need to understand it in order for you to be able to lead the team, no matter where you're sitting, whether it's sales, marketing, etc. They need to at least know what Azure is, at least know what Microsoft does, because they'll be speaking to their teams about it. So I think it really depends where they sit, but it's a mix. I would say at a high level, most people need to know a little bit about technology, but then most people will also have specific skills which are needed to support the function in which they manage. So most people so we have like sales managers, but we also have technical sales managers, and we have software engineering managers and marketing managers and things like that. So I hope that helps answer the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. And then I'm not sure if you'll know this is slightly more sort of software developer question, but what sort of certifications are required to start in the Microsoft team if you wanted to be using sort of SQL, C# tools? So very much software development level. If it's not your bag, we can move on, but I'll ask it.
No, we have developer certifications within Microsoft Learn. So if you just type in developer, I can't remember the code for it, but the certifications are all split up basically based on typically kind of like the roles in which you may go into. So there will be like infrastructure certifications, which will be like the Azure administrator will be the more technical one. Then there'll be the developer one. Then there'll be the DevOps. Then there'll be AI. So they're split like that. So there are developer specific certifications. I can't remember the code for it, but it'll be the same kind of code for the level. So 900 is it's probably like developer 900. And then 104 is more technical, then 300 is more, and then it kind of goes up like that. So that would be my advice. If you go on Microsoft Learn and type in developer, you should be able to see the certifications which are available.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And then for the sort of Facebook, Apple, Amazon type companies, do you think it's worth working there, or should people try to start with other companies if they're trying to get into a job into tech, and then if it's there, and then move into those large companies if it's their aspiration? I think it's really worth it grinding away at trying to get into the grad schemes at the sort of early stage.
So it really just depends on what you want to do. Like all experience, I think is worth it. It depends. So if you start at a big, obviously tech company, you have to think you kind of start at the peak of your career very early on. So it really depends on what you want to do after. If you're really conscious of the fact that you really want to learn quickly, or you want to pick up loads of things really fast and things like that, you might want to work at a smaller company. Because obviously then you have to wear lots of different hats at a startup or something like that, and that's going to require lots of different skills, and then use those skills to get into a big company after. But if you're looking to work for a big name brand, you want the opportunity to do stuff like travel, you're more concerned about kind of having a steady career that's kind of like just goes on in the same direction, you might want to start in the big one. It really just depends. It's up to you. Like, it's definitely worth having experience from other companies, but it is absolutely okay if you don't. I know people who are 21 who came into Microsoft straight after university, never worked a day in their life, never sent an email, and they're at the company and they're doing fine. They're doing great. So it really just depends. Either way is a good route.
Completely agree. I think it's very much personal preference. And also, I guess, the specialisms as well within a large company allow you to specialize much more acutely versus, like you said, startups. You generally have to be slightly more of a generalist.
Yeah, got to wear a lot of hats.
Yeah. And then how do employees communicate within Microsoft? How much of this is done on sort of text first, DM level, opposed to sort of talking or getting to meet up face to face?
Okay, so so pre-pandemic, obviously we were a very face-to-face company. So you could go into the office, you could speak to people. We'd have monthly meetings and monthly celebrations or and things like that with your team. But this is very team dependent and also departmental dependent. So working in the sales, or even before the pandemic, I was working from home because obviously I have to go to clients. So there's not as much requirements for me. So I wasn't working from home all the time, but I was working from home sometimes and things like that. So there wasn't as much requirement for me to go in the office. But we now, post-pandemic, is a different world. So we're obviously a lot on Teams and we're trying to kind of get back to face-to-face as well. But it's really team dependent. Some managers will want to meet up regularly. Some managers will be conscious of the fact that their teams don't need to be in. But we communicate depending on what exactly needs to be done. Day to day, of course, we have Teams and we use Teams every day, and it's a great platform to have conversations. But the thing is about the culture of the company is that everyone is really, really friendly. And I know it sounds like everybody says that about their company, but they are. So if you did want to meet someone, you just message them and say, oh, would you like to come for a coffee? And they more than likely will say yes, or we'll try and organize a time. You don't feel siloed or anything like that. So yeah, it just really depends.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. And then a large question here. Yes, it's going to be a big one. What do you see as a future of Azure? What kind of new products, what areas is it sort of moving into?
So there's a lot of things going on, I think, in regards to the future of just cloud in general. So things like quantum computing, high performance computing as well. So more using kind of much larger compute systems to do a lot more. And obviously, if we were able to crack quantum computing, that's going to be a helper for a number of different things across the world. And so I think that's where the future really is, using the much larger systems, obviously, to help do a lot more for the world, just for cloud computing in general. And obviously, data and AI is a big focus for everyone across all the functions of every tech company. Every cloud company is thinking about how can we leverage the data that company have, how can we use that analytics to make a difference, whether it's to save money, save a person, save the environment. I think that's probably where it's going. But there's a lot online if you're looking to think about the future and some of the things that we're working on. Anything that's out there, you'll find is public information. Just type in Azure and just read through it. But that's kind of like where I think cloud is going in general. Not that I have a specific kind of answer for it.
Yeah. And I guess following on from the Azure question, what made you want to specialize with sort of the Azure product suite in Microsoft versus different areas of the Microsoft packages?
So I was really interested in Azure because I love the fact that it was. Oh, thank you, Richard. I love the fact that it was. It's just so broad, but it is such a core function. So everything sits in the cloud, right? No matter what exactly you are doing. Well, not everything, but everything should. And it's kind of like the foundation. Microsoft Azure is the foundation of everything that we do. And that really interested me. And I also thought, I love the idea of working on data and AI in the future as well, and how interesting that would be. The migration of kind of servers and data from on-premises into the cloud just really interests me. And I think the case studies I've written, I've read some of the stuff that my companies are doing with cloud is just so mind-blowing. And I think when I was reading kind of some of the case studies, I was like, this is so interesting to me. What else can I do here? So yeah, I'm really, that's what interested to me. I think it's just like the potential of Azure, of its growth and what it can do, is definitely for me. Whereas like some people love modern work, they love Teams and they love how that can support people day to day. I was thinking more about kind of like innovation for the future.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And then for someone who's got absolutely zero experience in tech, I know we've touched on this already, but would you recommend joining a sort of boot camp or doing self-taught learning?
So I don't know if I would recommend either, but I would definitely say that a boot camp comes with its benefits in regards to it is much more structured, obviously, because you have an instructor and stuff like that, and that's going to help you and that's going to support you with the learning. Some very good boot camps are also not certified. They're not going to guarantee you a job, but they have partnerships with tech companies, which means that they can probably help you with interviews. They can do career fairs and things like that. So for me, the money for a boot camp is worth kind of it. They can be expensive, but if they're too expensive, for example, my second degree costs like £7,000 or something like that. If they're too expensive, then you might as well then do a degree. In my thinking, you might as well just do the extra year. So it really depends. You don't want to spend too much money. Some of these are asking for crazy stuff, but I think the structure of it is worth it for me. It depends whether or not you think you can actually teach yourself. Some people can. Don't get me wrong. They are great self-taught developers. They have the time. They have the structure. They can just do it themselves. So if you think you can, and you're someone that can take the time just to learn, then absolutely go for self-taught and save yourself the money.
Yeah, absolutely. And then sort of a double-headed question here on what can be done to get more sort of diverse candidates in tech, and how do you think we can improve diversity in more senior levels of tech? I think the entry level, sort of top of the funnel, is pretty good at the moment.
Yeah,
we'll agree, but as soon as we sort of progressing into sort of middle management, senior management, less diverse. So
yeah.
I'd love to hear some of your opinions on how we can improve that.
Definitely. I think attrition is a tough one, keeping people actually in. But I think it's down, a lot of the time is down to the company making sure that someone sees a future for them within that organization, and asking and finding out. Because a lot of people talk about the statistics and we talk about the numbers, but a lot of the time no one can actually tell us why. Like, why is it that there's less people as we get, more senior? What is going on? Is it the culture at the company that we're working at? Is it just that people don't see themselves there, so they don't end up getting there? Is there some bias there? So I'm not exactly sure what the why is, and when we figure out the why, it'll be much easier. But I think for me, as someone who is still early in career, for me, it's important to actually see someone being senior. And it's not good enough for companies to just say, oh, well, they're not applying. Well, you have to figure out why. You have to go out there. Is it the application process? Is it the job description that's putting people off and making them think, oh, well, I've never known anyone to actually do that. That looks like me. Maybe I need to go. And if you don't have diversity in leadership within your own organization, bring people in from different organizations to talk about their experience. That's really going to help people to be like, okay, let me get up, keep going. So yeah, it's a difficult one, but for me personally, I just think representation matters, and people feeling like, okay, I can actually be a director. That's important, because a lot of people, they might not apply if they feel like, well, I'm just going to be by myself up there. Every meeting, every get together, every work thing, it's just me. So making them feel like you can bring people in, maybe especially if you're bringing them externally. I guess when the funnel is not great at the bottom, will really help as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Then a little personal plug for you. Someone has asked if you have a website for the Tech Corner.
Oh, I don't have a website, but I have an Instagram and I have a TikTok. So it's the Tech Corner. It's missing the last E on the end. So that's it. I have an Instagram and a TikTok.
Perfect. And then straight back into the technical questions. Someone's asked if you could give an example of the simplest way to explain Kubernetes.
Kubernetes. I saw that. To be honest, I would say go to Tech World with Nana. She's really good at explaining. I don't want to explain it on it now. I don't get it. But it's essentially the management of containers. The thing is with Kubernetes, if you start to explain Kubernetes, you have to explain containers, and then you have to explain why containers are different to virtual machines, and then the whole thing just starts to unravel. So I would say it's just the orchestration and management of containers. So if you think of Kubernetes as literally an orchestrator of a band for containers, that's essentially what it is. But you can find information. Tech World with Nana explains it really, really well.
Yeah. We're about to fall down a massive DevOps trap there. And then someone's asked, have you noticed any different sort of personality traits between sort of the technical and non-technical roles, and are people more suited to one or the other?
So I think there is a misconception that specific people in specific roles have to be a specific way, but I don't think so. I think if you want to be in a non-technical role, most of the time your skills have to be people related. So if you're a non-technical role, then more than likely you're talking to a lot of people, you're working with teams, you're collaborating, and things like that. So you're in sales, you're in marketing and things like that. So that requires you to do a lot of talking, but people think talking means extroverted, which it definitely doesn't. I'm actually not an extroverted person. I think I'm a bit of an ambivert, so I don't like to spend loads of times with people, but I'm happy to talk. So if you're happy to talk, then you absolutely will survive. You'll be okay. You don't have to be extroverted. There are some great salespeople who are introverted, and they're very, very good at their jobs because they know what they're doing, right? And they know what they're talking about. So it isn't just you going off talking rubbish, just rambling. It's actually, if you know what you're doing, you'll be fine. And then obviously with technical, it tends to be people obviously who are interested in the deep. And that's it. If you're really interested in the detail, then that's I guess the personality trait of someone who is more technical, because obviously you need to have the detail, but it doesn't mean you're a specific type of person, right? It doesn't mean you are more talkative or less talkative or more outgoing. I know very outgoing technical people and very kind of introverted non-technical people. So really depends on whether or not you're interested in it. But of course, there'll be specific things in the job that you have to do, which will require you to do certain things. So just be sure of whether or not you want to do them, essentially.
Yeah. Well, we have sort of run out of time. There are so many more questions. So if we haven't been able to ask your question and you really want to know more, please do ask Hosanna on social media on the Tech Corner. And if you get around to it, I'm sure there might be a deluge after this. But I'd like to also personally thank you for your time. Very insightful talk. Lots of useful information for how to sort of get into tech and so what different roles within tech look like, and also your personal story, which is very interesting.